Hi, I'm Prabhat Gautam, and today I get to interview Monica Chen at Factory Farming Awareness Coalition. How are you, Monica?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being had on the show. We're done now. It was an amazing episode. Uh, so I'm so excited to learn about everything you guys are doing at FFAC. So first, let's start with when did you get involved with Factory Farming Awareness Coalition, and what does the organization do?
So, the history of Factory Farming Awareness Coalition actually goes back to my college days when I knew Katie Cantrell, who is the founder of FFAC, and we were both students at UC Berkeley. And what Katie realized is that there's a lot of courses that touch tangentially upon public health, social justice, and the environment, but they weren't talking about food. So we realized that there was a niche that wasn't being filled. And so Katie just started to give presentations to the various houses on campus, to various classes, and they were so successful. There was so much demand that we've actually been able to expand into many different regions of the United States and Canada, giving presentations not just at the college level, but at the high school level, to companies. I've even presented to elementary school students, kindergartners even. So this is what we do. It's really just raising awareness about the impacts of our food choices and really connecting it to issues that people already care about, so it doesn't seem as though it's some abstract animal rights only thing. Really, the exploitation of animals impacts so many other groups, and we try and make sure that that connection is very clear. And then
And I know
from our
your organization talks about social justice as far as the environment and immigrant rights
Mhm.
and health and everything else, right?
Yeah, absolutely, it does. And because we are able to do that, I think that we're able to reach audiences that have historically been somewhat inaccessible to the animal rights movement. I mean, we are speaking in high schools where the students are saying, like, we care about Black Lives Matter, or we care about immigrant rights, and we're able to connect these things to factory farming. And through our presentations, we've actually been able to employ our second strategy, which is mobilizing activists. So from our presentations and our general outreach, we have gone, I'd say, almost 150 interns at this point. We've just 75 this summer, actually, and they're at the college and the high school level all over the United States. And we're training them to advocate for institutional change on their campuses, bringing plant-based food to their dining facilities or to their catering. And we've actually been pretty successful in this, not only at the campus level, but even with municipalities. In the city of Berkeley is a really great example where we were able to say, hey, you have a climate action plan. Your goal is to reduce carbon emissions. The quickest way to do that really is through our food choices. And so Berkeley City Council members are eating vegan, and Berkeley restaurants have vegan entree options and are participating in Green Monday.
That's amazing. So with everything you're doing at Factory Farming Awareness Coalition, you're going to K through end of college, right?
Mhm.
How has this sort of time period affected you all? Are you able to do as many presentations remotely? Are you doing the same? Are you doing more? How has it all changed?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, certainly it was a shock to us when shelter in place began. I had never seen anything like it before. You know, I used to always say, how is it possible to convince 7.6 million cars to no longer drive again? Because that's the impact of everybody in the US eating plant-based is, 7.6 million cars being taken off the road. And now we're seeing, whoa, we can really change so much. What we never thought was possible now is. And because we're now online, we're able to reach more classes than ever before. We're not limited to just where we have staff. And school teachers don't have really the infrastructure in place and the curriculum in place to do their typical classes. So there's actually demand for pre-recorded presentations or presentations that we've adapted to meet whatever educational mode they're using, such as Nextpod, right? Where we're able to actually put in assessment questions. And so the teachers can just say, okay, here is a lesson, here is the assessment for it. And that's been really successful.
That's good. You nerded out on us with the next pod. For the people out there that don't know, um, a lot of different companies now, Google, other companies are doing these programs where students are able to have all the curriculum because they're all working from home.
Mhm.
And that really does give you an opportunity to help design curriculum. And you have all your videos, right? that are on
Yeah, the
YouTube and that are
videos.
accessible to everybody.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that the video presentations are great. We try and advocate for live presentations where the students are able to ask questions, because that back and forth is really important. And ideally what we do is give what I call lessons over Zoom, where we're able to put the kids into breakout rooms, have the kids question, why do we treat Fido the dog this way and then these pigs a different way? And by having the students sort of debate that and come to their own conclusions, it's really a lot more powerful and will result in greater dietary change over time.
That's wonderful. And it really is a chance for students to make a giant change that's going to affect them for the rest of their lives. Like what I think is amazing about what FFAC is doing is so many organizations are really on pause, right? Like funding is an issue. They can't do the kind of outreach they normally do. Well, really, it sounds like you all are doubling your efforts. And your issue is there's so many schools that want you. It's having enough employees and time and paid staff that can do all the presentations. Like it's a great problem to have that there's so much demand and everybody wants you.
Yeah, and really, I mean, what's taking up even more time is just the intern applicants, because we had to make a decision. We received so many intern applications and high school mentee applications, and we only were able to accept less than 20% of them. I think it was like 17%, which means that there are so many kids that want to be involved, but we were really limited by the number of cohort leaders we could have. We try and have no more than 16 kids per cohort. So we expanded to 5 cohorts, which is so many, but there's clearly a need for even more.
And that's amazing. So yeah, let's let everybody know where they can donate, because obviously the more funding you have, the more you're going to be able to get to all these schools remotely or otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
How can people support FFAC? I know for me, having help at fundraising events together, it's always great to have people that'll allow their homes to be used for fundraisers. And also just, simple things where they can do a dinner or a gathering with other donors or people in the community to really find new volunteers and other potential donors. So I think people can not only write a check, but also, be a leader in their city to help bring in more money. So you don't have to go to everybody's door everywhere in America to get them to donate.
No, definitely not. Yeah, so please go to our website, ffacoalition.org, and there's a donate button in the top right. And I really appreciate what you said about house events, because FFAC really thrives on community. When I think back to the origin of FFAC, it goes back to Katie and I being friends. And I had only just become vegan at that point in my life. Would I have stayed vegan if I didn't have somebody who also believed in this cause, who was willing to cook meals with me, share with things with me? Back then, the VegWeb website was really cool. And having that community really strengthened my activism. I went from just being vegan to being an activist. And so if there are people who care about these issues and can connect more of us, that's really also the joy of the intern program, right? You take all these kids who are like, maybe I care about this, and then they realize, yeah, and there's a community of other activists. I want to be involved in that. So I'm very interested in meeting more people. So if there are any folks out there who want to connect and help build that community, whether it's through a fundraising event or coming to any of our events, like our virtual Veg Fest, our end of year events, our Mac Downs, like I would really welcome that.
And that's great. Yeah, and I found that it's the community leaders do so much. Like people don't understand that what you said is like if they open their house up for for staff or interns to stay there, or to just say, hey, like I'll be your point of contact in this city. And, I'm in Los Angeles, so it's like having point of contact in Orange County, in Chicago, in DC, San Francisco, New York, like knowing who that key person is, even if their house isn't the house used for the fundraiser, they can go to their friends and you're getting a beautiful house for free for an event. You're getting catering. You're just getting so many pieces put together. And having that on the ground local representative of the organization, and they're a community member. So it's just so hugely valuable.
Yeah, so our hubs are the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, Los Angeles, Portland, Seattle, Salt Lake City, Denver, Chicago, New York, And so in those particular cities, we really have like a very strong on the ground presence. And if you're in those cities, we want to connect you to them. But also if you're in another city, we would love to connect you, train you potentially to be giving presentations. We have that going on in, I think, 10 cities across the United States where they're not full FFAC staff, but they are people who are out there giving presentations. And that's something that I really want to encourage because it really allows us to broaden our scope and get the
I
message.
want to go from city to city across the country. Can you train me in every city? You just help me go everywhere? No, what I love though is your organization really is national. Like, so what you said, like, as you're training these interns, they're going to go back to their home states, and you know that work's going to continue. You're really building up activists forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's powerful. So I want to know about you and your journey. So where did your activism start? I mean, I know Katie's amazing, but you probably were an activist even before Katie cooked all those meals for you.
Yeah, I think that when I reflect upon my journey, it was just so all over the place. And I remember being very envious at certain points in my life of people whose lives were just, like my friends that wanted to be doctors, right? It was like every single year of their life throughout high school and college and med school and residency, like they knew what they would be doing. And I've certainly just gone all over the place. I worked as a third grade teacher on the Navajo reservation, which was an incredibly challenging experience where I learned about the differences between, rural poverty and urban poverty, and had to tell children to drink dairy milk, otherwise we wouldn't get our funding, like that kind of thing. I've worked in environmental education. I've worked in mental health, working as a suicide prevention counselor with Alameda County Crisis Support Services, volunteered my time working in prisons, like at San Quentin Prison, helping students get their AA degrees. And it's all these different experiences that, are rooted in environmental justice, social justice, and I bring all of that to my work with FFAC. And I sometimes, will tell this story to the interns, and I hope that what they get out of it is that it's okay not to have like a predetermined path where every single stage is really defined. And if that is your path, that's great. But for a lot of people, including myself, having those different experiences has enabled me to talk more clearly about the connections between factory farming and all these other issues.
I see all your things coming together. You're going to teach third graders that are in prison to have non-dairy milk. What's going to happen? And hopefully there's not a lot of third grade prisoners. And if there are, you'll be the first one fighting to get them out of prison. But what you said is what I really totally agree with and believe in, is all those experiences make you richer in the best sense, where you can understand, the struggle for Native American people in this country, like what they've gone through. And, I have a good friend she was an attorney, and she worked, on tribal land. And she said, just the level of extreme poverty that's there. And people think like, oh, there's all these federal grants and they have all this help. And it's like, those are some of the poorest communities sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really sad. And you need people in there advocating for them, because sometimes it is adversarial with them and the federal government. So, you want somebody to stand up for them. So I think it's great that all these things have really taught you a lot, and it helps you with your work as an executive director, which is amazing.
Yeah, I would also just say that like those types of experiences enable me to speak very authentically, where it doesn't always feel like I'm speaking like for somebody, but and it's just like me coming from top down and just being like, I have the best solution. It's like I'm able to speak from my experiences. And I think that rings true for a lot of people. And I just wanted to make sure that was really clear, because so many times, I see people like really being very hesitant to talk about veganism as it relates to culture in particular. Culture is an area that people are sometimes afraid to touch, or how can you talk about veganism when you're speaking to students that are in poverty, or how can you speak to students that, have historically consumed certain animal products. And really being somebody who has been able to work in these communities and talk to people and learn more about history, like with the Navajo, one of the first foods that will come to mind that you hear of is fry bread. Like fry bread is very strongly associated with Navajo culture. And from being in these communities and talking with people, including some of my best friends now, we've realized that actually fry bread is not part of a traditional Dene diet. Really, that came because the government was forcing the natives to go on this long walk, and they gave them flour and lard. And so that became part of the traditional diet. But really, if you go back before then, it was things like blue corn mush.
Yeah. Isn't that something where something associated with a culture or group of people was thrust upon them, and it's not in their best interest to even have it. And that's something I think too. When you talk about being authentic, it's if you're well-rounded and you care about a lot of people in a lot of areas, then you can't be pegged to somebody who only cares about animal rights issues because you're overly sensitive and you love your little bunny rabbits and you're just a nice person and you care too much and that's your problem in the world. Like you're actually somebody who cares about fighting for justice and fighting injustice everywhere. And when that's the case, you'll be an ally for the people that are involved in Black Lives Matter. You'll be an ally for Native Americans, people in prison, like domestic violence, suicide prevention, all that. Like you want a better world for everybody, and part of why you became vegan is you want a just world and you want to do your part. And in any I've always, well, I totally agree with you what you said. I've always said it's so valuable when you talk to people about their issue, their cause, and then you support them, because if you support them, they're much more receptive to our vegan agenda. What's our agenda? It's to have people live long, healthy lives and have children and families and friends and parents that live long, healthy lives. Like that's our agenda is very clear. We want people to be healthy and not die horrific, deaths from heart attack, stroke, which are the leading cause of death in this country. And, I think your work is so amazing because really the earlier you can get people living healthy and thinking compassionately, it just improves their entire community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and really, that's partially why I love working so much with children. I am an educator at heart, and when I talk to students, like you talk to any kid, and they'll be able to say, "Wow, it's wrong for you to hurt these animals." Like I think that as people get older, they try and justify a whole lot more, and they're like, "It has to be this way." But at a very basic level, kids are like, "No, that's not right." And
Yeah.
that is something that I definitely take to heart, and it keeps me going. This kind of work can be very depressing. Like you and I both know that this work,
Yeah.
and if you're reading the news, if you're paying attention, this can be like very soul sucking work. And that's why I think it's so important to find the things in your life that keep you going, that keep you inspired, which for me is working with youth. And I'm somebody who's a huge advocate, right, of, Angela Davis, Audre Lorde, like saying, okay, self-care is this really radical act. What does it mean for me? And how is this like fully integrated into my life? And not something like, how sometimes we think of self-care as like bubble baths or chocolate, things that require time and
Right.
money. Like I look at it in a very holistic way of like, how can we incorporate self-care as a term into our lives so that we can do this work long-term in a sustainable way, and I don't view it as something that's self-indulgent. So really, I try and teach that to the kids as well.
Yeah. And yeah, you're in it for the long haul. You want people to be caring, compassionate, healthy people forever. And I think a lot of people in activism feel bad about binge watching or seeing what's pop culture or watching YouTube videos. And if it makes them happy, like every minute of the day doesn't need to be activism, because if you're a happier person, then when you do the activism, it's going to go further. And we can also relate, like I felt like watching Tiger King, when some people were like, I don't know if you're going to like it, was so valuable, because by the end of it, it's like, oh, here are different, here's why I am anti-zoo. And when people saw it, they're like, well, it's clear, like the negatives of zoos. So, you can get a really good window into everything because you're watching this pop culture show. So it's, yeah, it helps us relate to people too. So yeah, that's great. One of the things that I wanted to really focus on with you is So you're doing this internship program, you have all this staff, which is amazing, from all over the country. Like, that's all wonderful, wonderful. Um, Talk to me about the videos, because I looked through all of the YouTube videos you've done, and talk to me about why it's important for Factory Farming Awareness Coalition to really open source it and let everybody use your videos, and especially in a world where everybody wants to have, it's copyrighted, it's owned by them, it has to be authorized through them. You're really the opposite as an organization.
Yeah, that actually is one of our values that I really want to stress, is that we care about getting the message out there more than the recognition. So we collaborate with whoever will want to work with us. And, in so many ways, I've just been really thrilled to learned that our message does resonate with so many different groups. Like, we're able to work with like the Sunrise Youth Movement, right? The groups, the kids that are like climate activists, and like, great, there's a connection there. Or we can partner with Default Veg or some of the organizations in 50 by 40, and we offer our resources, because if they have an audience that we're not able to access, then it's great that the information is getting out there. So whether something is called like an FFAC video or not, like that really doesn't matter to me. What matters most to me is that the information is out there and it's available, for free on the internet. And I hope that people watch it.
And this isn't meant to be ageist, but it may be. I think it's technologist. I think you and Katie, coming from not just the Berkeley area, but also just your age range, sort of the way the world is, I think it's a world of, okay, I own it or I want to share it. Where it really is it totally proprietary, as some companies do, or is it open source? And I think it probably is just the DNA of leadership from Katie to you, where you all just believe in the value of sharing and highlighting everybody else and putting other organizations first and saying the great work they're doing, because you don't view it as they're in competition with you and you're the one animal rights organization, or you're the one social justice group that should like overarchingly rule the world, right? You just like this bizarre dictatorship thing that you see sometimes within organizations, where they're like, well, I want good to be done, but as long as our branding is on it and we get all the credit. Like, well, if that doesn't happen, would you rather the world not be as good? Like, what happens, So I just think it's amazing that is such a core value. Me meeting you recently and knowing Katie for years, just like that being such a part of the DNA of the organization. And I think that's honestly why it probably is, you're not as mega funded as a lot of other organizations, because you just do the work and you make a difference, and you're not fighting for being the one that gets noticed for everything. And sometimes, right, the nerdy student in the classroom doing all the work, nobody says anything to them because they're not getting into trouble. Like, you guys don't get into any trouble, so we don't really always know that you need to raise money. And because you're so effective, people don't see the need as much, because they just think, well, they've always figured it out. And I think because you make every dollar go further. But really, you definitely can use more funding so you can grow the organization really to every state and every city and every state. And just I would say just the internship program alone, for you to be creating this next level of activists. Wow. Like, what's the value in that?
Yeah, I think that, in so many ways we've been so generous that sometimes with our time and the, how we haven't needed to have our brand everywhere, that has meant that we haven't received as much recognition for our work, which, on the one hand we're fine with, but then of course it does affect our funding. And I really am pushing to increase our funding right now, because it's become very clear that we can't be a social justice organization and have all these interns from all over the place if we don't compensate them for their time and their effort. And I think that a lot of animal rights organizations have a lot of relatively privileged people who come from like middle income backgrounds at the very least, or have family that they can rely on. And so we've been able to pay these activists very small amounts of money, and they've been able to do the work and do phenomenal work, right? Like, I'm not trying to take away from that at all. Right. But if we want to expand our movement, if we want interns, like I've had interns who are like, Monica, I need you to be able to pay me at least close to minimum wage. Otherwise, I'm going to have no choice but to work at Taco Bell. Like, I live in a trailer park. and like me not being able to like compensate them even a little bit to cover like their bus tickets to get here was hard in the beginning. So I'm really interested in, you know, improving our revenues so that we are able to do our work more effectively and reach people that, again, historically have not been reached by the AR movement.
One of the things I loved when we chatted recently is when you said, as a social justice organization, you want everyone to have a living wage. Like, you think that's the bare minimum of what you should be doing. And I think it was so refreshing for me to hear that, because I have sat across from major donors that have said they view activism as a privilege. And I said, I view it as a responsibility. I want every citizen to exercise their activism. Not only is it not a privilege, it's a lot of work, and those activists should be, especially the younger the possible, they should be taken care of. Wherever you can. We want to change their school lunches for vegan meals, but then when they want to do internships, we should be able to figure out a paid internship for them.
Yeah, so that they then go and do this work more full time, right? So that they're not
Yeah.
like, oh, I might as well work at Taco Bell where I'll make more money. And the psychology of what you're talking about is very interesting to me, because I, saw these images of chickens being crammed into battery cages, and I was like, wow, if I'm even able to walk around, like, how can I ever, complain about my finances or anything else, really? Like, I'm doing so well. I have so much privilege, and I martyred myself hard. Like in my early 20s, I was like, whatever I can do to help the movement, I will. And I burned out, as so many people do, really quickly. And it's really a shame to me that we see this happening in the animal rights movement all the time. Like those people that do the undercover investigations, or the people that are consistently every single day, like at FFAC, giving 7 presentations over 7 periods per day. Like that is exhausting work, and they will not be able to do it over the long term. So if we want people to do it over the long term, then we have to provide support. And that includes health insurance so that they can go to therapy. Like really basic things like that are very important. And for Katie, right? Katie is on leave right now, and I want to be able to make sure that our employees, if they ever need to go on medical leave, they have health insurance. Like these are things that matter a lot to me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it really, I'm hoping more of the new leadership with all the organizations, as we've sort of seen a giant wave of new people in leadership over the last couple of years. I hope they all really think about that, because exploiting interns, exploiting employees for low wages is like, it's the opposite of everything we want to be about on every level. We appreciate the free help, but the goal should be eventually. It has always really been one of my biggest criticisms for a long time in the nonprofit world across the board. The number of people that intern somewhere hoping they'll get a job and never get a job there. And it's sort of the carrot that's dangled to them, like, oh, well, when we're hiring, don't worry, we'll look at hiring you. And those young people never get hired. It feels very disingenuous to me. And if you're going to just exploit them for free labor, just tell them that's what you're doing. And then let them quit early. Let them break up with you before you break up with them, if the whole goal was you weren't really serious about them anyway. Like that was like 12 analogies mixed into one. But it just really just bothered me, though. Like I've seen it over and over again, where people intern believing they'd get a job they never got. And the organization never really was going to hire them. They just knew they were getting this free help and they weren't going to turn that down. Mm-hmm. And it's just not the kind of people we want to be. So I love everything you're doing there. Talk to me about your relationship with Green Mondays. And such a beautiful program. I talked to you before about how, at UCLA, we tried for years and years and years to get them to go meatless to no avail. Katie shows up, and within less than 6 months, they're a Green Monday school, when every major organization failed for 10 years. Because I know I am very involved with this animal rights student group at UCLA. And I saw all the groups come and go and say they're working on it to see nothing get done. And then Green Mondays was their great hero. So talk to me about sort of what that organization is and how you collaborate with them at Effective Farming Awareness Coalition.
Yeah, so Green Monday started to gain traction in Hong Kong. And the founder is David Young, who I hope that you will be able to interview soon. And the idea behind Green Monday is that they're that there is an environmental benefit to eating more plant-based, and it doesn't dictate how you should do that. So it can be routine-based, right? It can be one day per week, or you could like meatless Monday, essentially, right? One day a week where you're not eating plant-based, or you could flip that and make it meat Monday. So the other 6 days of the week, you're not eating meat. It could be routine-based. So for kids, right? Breakfast and dinner, they're eating with their families. Maybe lunch is where they have a little bit more control over what they're eating. Great, then a third of your meals are plant-based. That's a huge step, right? It could be impact-based, so really thinking about like what causes the most carbon emissions or something like that, and or even reducing, right? So instead of having a steak take up your full plate, have a bowl, fill it with veggies and grains and all these things, and then put only a little bit of steak on top, right? That's still a dramatic reduction. And so this is a really important point to make, is that we know that just telling people to go vegan overnight isn't going to happen, and that people need support. And that's been very clear from working with students. Students are not always in that place where they're able to just go vegan right away. So how do we do that? We celebrate those small incremental changes. And by emphasizing the environmental impact, we've been able to, again, make this a policy at the city level, so it's recognizable and something that people can understand. Meatless is a great campaign. I know that it started as a health initiative, but meatless sounds like you're taking something away from people.
Right.
And Green Monday is just something that I think a lot of people can get behind. We're not necessarily dictating exactly what they should be doing, but it's making it very clear that this is an environmental thing, and we're trying to emphasize adding something in. So there are a lot of people that are like, you're taking away my meat. No, we're adding in the Impossible Burger, the Beyond Burger. We're adding in more fruits and vegetables. 9 out of 10 Americans don't get enough vegetables. Like, that is something that people can be very on board with. And I think that's why it's been so successful.
Yeah, we're adding green. Like, it's really, it's a benefit. And I think that's a great way to look at it, instead of people lose out on something. I mean, I used to always give this speech about how, and it was years ago, so it may have changed now, but how the average vegan I would say they only live 7 years longer than a meat eater. And I'd say, there's really no reason to change. You're only gonna live 7 years longer. And I'd say, if you think about it, what's 7 years worth? Like, do you want to change your diet? Is it really worth it? And I said, but I should tell you, the 40 years before those 7 years are really what matters. When you're gonna have to take a bunch of medication, you're gonna have multiple surgeries if you have the standard American diet. So I would say, like, at the end, it's only 7 years, but what's the quality of life for the 40 years up to the last 7? And really, on top of it, obviously, all the ethical reasons and everything else. But, at the beginning, I tried to start it with, it's not really worth it for you all, don't change, jokingly. And I said, no, really, you should change, because, I mean, it's sad to see anybody. I just talked to a interventional radiologist today, a good friend of mine. He was talking about how, they have to go in and do these surgical procedures when people are having problems with their legs, their toes. Like, he said, most people die within a year when they have major issues with their legs, the varicose, all the veins and everything. And he said, if you don't treat it early, and he said, I don't want to treat this surgically. I want people to change their diets, and I want them to get exercise. And if they don't, we have to go in surgical. And if we're doing that, it's all scary, because, things can go wrong. And on top of it, once you get to that level, it's dangerous. You want to, so really, what I love is seeing Green Mondays at college campuses, getting young people that really think about this stuff. And I'm sure you've seen it, right? Where the young people are much more receptive to veganism and adding, plant-based items. And thank you to Beyond and Impossible and all the other companies that have come along.
Yeah, I mean, one of our tactics is to tell the kids, look at how much plant-based food products are increasing in sales, right? This is the fastest growing sector of the grocery store industry. And it's because millennials and Generation Zers are like largely driving this trend. And we look at, in our presentations, here are some of the people that or idolize, and they are also doing this. So really, like, saying we do this in part because of recycling, right? Like, why do people recycle? Right. It's not because they're necessarily like sure of their exact impact, but what really got it going was, seeing all their neighbors recycling. It's kind of like
Right.
that. So we are trying to show the kids that there is a lot of demand for this and that there are people who care about this and have integrated it into their lives.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and I love the whole Green Mondays initiative. So before we go, um, if young people want to be part of the internship program, if people want to donate or they want to host at their house, um, what's your mailing address so they can send you money or send you interns? Can they fly interns to your door? No, where can they email or fill out forms or learn about any of these programs?
Yeah, again, please go to our website, ffacoalition.org. There's a lot of resources. There are just a lot of resources up on that website. You can see blog posts written by our interns. You can see all of our upcoming events. And right now, every single one of them is virtual. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, as long as you have an internet connection, you will be able to participate in our volunteer work parties. You will be able to attend our Veg Fest. You will be able to attend any of our webinars, which range from like health topics, like about the pandemic and how to talk to people about the connection between the pandemic and our food choices. We have webinars about, cultured meat, everything. Our internship applications are on the website at the college level and at the high school level, our open job opportunities. And there's, again, that donate button where you're able to send us your contributions, either
Yeah.
one time or monthly. Right now we have a matching campaign, so your dollars are matched, which we'd be so grateful for if you could contribute. And you can sign up for our listserv on the website as well. So again, that's ffacoalition.org.
That's amazing. And obviously, people that have companies out there or um, that you want to do their own matching programs or, want to offer any of their funds or do a one-day fundraiser or anything, that would all be great. I know, Veggie Girl has done fundraisers for you all in the past, and I'm going to introduce you to Plant Power Fast Food. They're amazing. I'm sure they would love to do a fundraiser for you in San Diego or Los Angeles. So, yeah, keep doing the great work you're doing. And I'm really excited. I love every time I talk to you or now, you or Katie, there's always new initiatives, there's new people involved. It just, the work keeps growing. And who knew this time of COVID, you would be 12 times busier than normal. But
Yeah, it really does feel that way.
yeah,
But we're very excited about it. Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of things that we're able to do, especially because we have such a young staff and, as you put, are very technology literate.
yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, and that's the thing people don't realize. When people Google Docs and things like that, or just any open source stuff, or just people that they're texting, they're on email chains, this technology can move projects along so much quicker. And with all your videos being online, it's amazing. Like, yeah, you can just have interns share videos all day and not even be in any classroom
Mhm.
and never leave their PJs and just be like working away all day, eating their plant-based meals and changing the world. This is great. Well, thank you again, Monica. I loved our time together, and I look forward to everything FFAC does, and definitely encourage everybody to donate and also figure out ways they can help, whether it's using their homes or getting their children to be interns or themselves just volunteering whenever they can.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoy speaking with you every single time.
You're great, and thank you for all the work you do, not just for animal advocacy, but for everything else. So we'll talk to you soon, and thank you for everybody for tuning in.
Okay, bye.
Bye.